I'm Mr. Kael. And today, we're going to talk about something most couples misunderstand. Fighting is loud. Emotional distance is quiet. When couples fight, it feels serious. Voices rise. Emotions come out. Words are exchanged. It looks messy, but at least it's visible. You know something is wrong. But emotional distance doesn't look dramatic. There are no raised voices. No slammed doors. No big scenes. Just silence. Two people sitting in the same room. But not really feeling connected. They talk about daily tasks. Work. Bills. Schedules. But not about feelings. And because there is no fighting, many couples think everything is fine. But here's the truth. A relationship can survive arguments. It cannot survive emotional absence. When conflict happens, it means both people still care enough to react. When distance grows, it means someone has already started pulling away. And the most dangerous part? It happens slowly. So slowly that by the time you notice it, the connection is already weak. Today, we're going to understand why emotional distance is more dangerous than conflict, and what you can do before it becomes permanent. Many couples believe something very simple. If we're not fighting, our relationship must be healthy. It sounds logical. No arguments. No shouting. No drama. So everything must be okay, right? But this idea can be misleading. Sometimes couples don't fight because they understand each other well. But sometimes they don't fight because they stop trying. They avoid difficult conversations. They ignore small issues. They keep quiet to maintain peace. On the outside, it looks calm. But inside, small frustrations begin to build. One partner might feel unheard. The other might feel unappreciated. But instead of talking about it, they choose silence. Why? Because conflict feels uncomfortable. It's easier to say, it's fine. It's easier to move on. It's easier to avoid tension. Over time, this avoidance creates space. And that space slowly turns into emotional distance. A relationship without conflict is not automatically healthy. Sometimes, it just means both people are slowly disconnecting without realizing it. True connection doesn't mean no conflict. It means being willing to face it. Before we go deeper, we need to understand what emotional distance really means. It doesn't mean two people hate each other. It doesn't mean they're constantly arguing. In fact, emotional distance often looks very normal from the outside. Couples still live together. They still talk. They still handle responsibilities. But something is missing. Emotional distance means the connection has weakened. Conversations become surface level. There's less curiosity about each other's feelings. Less excitement to share thoughts. You stop asking, how are you really feeling? And start asking, did you pay the bill? There's nothing dramatic happening. Just less emotional presence. You may feel alone even when your partner is right next to you. You may hesitate to open up. Or feel like your partner won't fully understand you anymore. Sometimes it feels like you're living with a roommate instead of a partner. That's emotional distance. It's not loud. It's subtle. And because it grows slowly, many couples don't notice it until the relationship feels cold. Emotional distance doesn't appear suddenly. It usually begins with something small. Maybe a comment that hurt. Maybe a moment of feeling ignored. Maybe a disagreement that was never fully resolved. Instead of talking about it openly, one partner chooses silence. They think, it's not a big deal. Or, I don't want to start an argument. So they pull back slightly. Not in a dramatic way. Just a little less sharing. A little less openness. A little less effort. The other partner may notice the shift. But instead of asking directly, they also pull back. And now both people are protecting themselves. This is how the withdrawal pattern begins. Small hurt. No discussion. Emotional pullback. Less connection. Then it repeats. Each time something uncomfortable happens, instead of moving closer and solving it, both partners move further away. Over time, this becomes a habit. And the relationship slowly changes from emotional closeness to emotional safety. But safety without connection becomes distance. And distance, if left alone, keeps growing. Emotional distance usually does not start with something big. It often begins with a small hurt that was never properly addressed. Maybe one partner felt ignored during a conversation. Maybe something was said in frustration. Maybe there was a disagreement that felt unresolved. Instead of talking about it openly, one person decides to stay quiet. They tell themselves it's not important enough to bring up, or they don't want to create tension. That silence may feel harmless in the moment, but it slowly changes behavior. The person who felt hurt begins to share less. They become slightly more reserved. They stop expressing certain thoughts. It's not dramatic. It's subtle. At the same time, the other partner may sense the shift but not fully understand it. Instead of asking directly, they also pull back a little to avoid conflict. Now both people are protecting themselves. This is how the withdrawal pattern forms. A small issue appears, it goes unspoken, emotional closeness reduces, and distance grows slightly. Then another issue happens, and the same thing repeats. Over time, this becomes a habit. Instead of moving toward each other during discomfort, both partners move away. Eventually, the relationship may look calm on the outside, but emotionally it feels weaker. The connection that once felt natural now feels forced or limited. And because this pattern develops slowly, many couples don't realize how far apart they've grown until the distance feels difficult to close. Emotional distance rarely announces itself. It shows up in small behavioral changes that are easy to ignore at first. One of the earliest signs is shorter conversations. Replies become brief. Curiosity fades. Instead of asking follow-up questions or showing interest, responses feel automatic. The energy in conversation starts to feel different, even if the words sound normal. Another sign is reduced emotional sharing. Things that were once openly discussed, stress, dreams, frustrations, fears, are no longer brought up. A partner may say, "It's fine," more often, even when something clearly isn't. Over time, vulnerability decreases. And without vulnerability, emotional closeness cannot survive. Physical affection can also slowly reduce. Not necessarily in a dramatic way, but in subtle ways, fewer spontaneous touches, less warmth, less eye contact. It doesn't feel hostile. It just feels distant. Sometimes couples begin to operate more like teammates managing responsibilities rather than partners building intimacy. They talk about tasks, schedules, and obligations, but not about feelings. Life continues, but connection weakens. The most dangerous part is that these signs feel manageable. There's no major crisis. No explosive argument. Just a quiet shift in emotional presence. And because nothing dramatic is happening, many couples convince themselves that everything is still okay, until the distance becomes too noticeable to ignore. It may sound surprising, but conflict is not always a bad sign. In many cases, conflict shows that both people are still emotionally involved. When someone reacts strongly, argues, or expresses frustration, it usually means they still care enough to speak up. Conflict, when handled with respect, can actually bring two people closer. Healthy conflict allows feelings to be expressed instead of suppressed. It creates an opportunity to understand each other's perspectives. When disagreements are discussed openly, even if emotions rise, both partners remain engaged in the relationship. They are choosing to address the issue rather than avoid it. The key difference is how conflict is handled. Toxic conflict includes insults, disrespect, or emotional manipulation. Healthy conflict, on the other hand, focuses on the issue itself. It involves listening, explaining feelings, and trying to find common ground. It may feel uncomfortable in the moment, but it strengthens trust over time. Silence might look peaceful, but it doesn't always mean understanding. Sometimes it simply means something important is being ignored. And when issues are repeatedly ignored, emotional distance grows quietly. In a strange way, arguments can signal emotional investment. Emotional distance often signals detachment. And detachment, if left unaddressed, is far more difficult to repair than a disagreement. When emotional distance continues for a long time, the damage is not sudden, it's gradual. At first, it may just feel like less excitement. Conversations feel routine. Time together feels predictable. But over months or even years, this emotional gap begins to change how both partners see each other. Attraction can slowly fade. Not because either person changed physically, but because emotional closeness creates attraction. When that closeness disappears, the relationship starts to feel flat. What once felt warm now feels neutral. What once felt special now feels ordinary. Trust can also weaken. Not because of betrayal, but because of emotional absence. When partners stop sharing openly, they begin to feel alone inside the relationship. And loneliness inside a relationship often hurts more than being single. Another long-term effect is living parallel lives. Both people continue their routines, manage responsibilities, and function as a team, but emotionally, they move separately. They may stop checking in deeply. They may stop celebrating each other's inner world. Over time, this creates a silent gap that becomes harder to bridge. Sometimes breakups that seem unexpected are actually the result of long emotional distance. One partner may suddenly say, "I don't feel connected anymore," and the other feels shocked. But the signs were there, just quiet and slow. Emotional distance rarely destroys a relationship overnight. It weakens it gradually, until one day the bond no longer feels strong enough to hold both people together. For many people, emotional distance doesn't feel dangerous at first. It actually feels safer. When you avoid conflict, you avoid tension. You avoid uncomfortable conversations. You avoid the risk of saying the wrong thing. In the moment, silence can feel like protection. Some people grow up in environments where conflict felt overwhelming or unsafe. Maybe arguments were loud and hurtful. Maybe expressing feelings led to rejection or criticism. So as adults, they learn to stay quiet instead of speaking up. Distance becomes a defense mechanism. Emotional distance can also feel like control. When you don't open up fully, you don't feel as exposed. You don't risk being misunderstood. You don't risk being vulnerable. But the same walls that protect you also block connection. Over time, avoiding conflict becomes a habit. Instead of asking difficult questions, partners change the topic. Instead of expressing hurt, they act normal. Instead of addressing tension, they let it pass. Each moment of avoidance feels small, but together they build emotional separation. Conflict requires courage. It requires openness. It requires trusting that the relationship is strong enough to handle discomfort. Distance feels easier because it avoids that risk. But while conflict can feel intense for a short time, emotional distance slowly weakens the relationship over a long time. Rebuilding emotional connection does not happen in one dramatic conversation. It starts with awareness. The first step is simply recognizing that distance exists. Many couples avoid naming it because they fear what it might mean. But acknowledging the gap is not a sign of failure. It is the beginning of repair. One important step is creating space for honest conversation without blame. Instead of saying, "You never care anymore," try expressing feelings in a calmer way. For example, "I feel like we've been less connected lately, and I miss how we used to talk." This shifts the focus from accusation to vulnerability. Reopening connection also requires curiosity. Ask open questions. Not about tasks or responsibilities, but about emotions. How have you been feeling lately? Is there something you've been holding in? Small invitations like this can slowly rebuild safety. Consistency matters more than intensity. Grand gestures rarely fix emotional distance. What helps more are small, repeated efforts, checking in regularly, showing interest, listening without interrupting, and being present without distractions. It's also important to allow discomfort. The first few conversations may feel awkward. There may be emotions that were buried for a long time. That discomfort is normal. It does not mean the relationship is breaking further. It means it is finally becoming honest again. Emotional connection is built through presence. Not perfection. Not constant agreement. Just the willingness to show up emotionally, even when it feels uncomfortable. Emotional distance does not begin with hatred. It begins with small moments of silence. Small moments where something important was not said. Small moments where vulnerability was replaced with protection. Conflict, when handled with respect, keeps a relationship alive. It shows that both people are still willing to engage. Emotional distance, on the other hand, slowly removes engagement. It creates space where connection used to exist. A healthy relationship is not one without disagreement. It is one where both people feel safe enough to speak honestly. Where discomfort is faced instead of avoided. Where emotional presence matters more than perfect behavior. If you notice distance in your relationship, it does not mean everything is over. It means attention is needed. It means something important is waiting to be addressed. Connection requires courage. Silence requires comfort. And over time, comfort without connection becomes emptiness. Now take a moment and reflect. Have you ever felt emotionally distant from someone you cared about? When did it start? Was it loud, or was it quiet? This is Mr. Kael. And sometimes, the quietest problems are the most important ones to face.